too fat for the white dress. The ex falls silent, seeing a gun in the new husband's hand. But before the silence, before the gun, and before the world turned upside down, there was only the suffocating sound of Mark's voice amplified by the church's expensive sound system. "Look at yourself, Elena," Mark said, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceilings of the St. Jude Cathedral. He was not whispering. He was not leaning in to share a private cold foot moment. He was holding the microphone, the one meant for his vows, and he was addressing the 300 guests sitting in the pews. "We had a deal. You were supposed to lose the weight. I gave you 6 months. I paid for the trainer. I paid for the meal plans. And you stand here, looking like a sausage casing about to burst." Elena froze. The bouquet of white roses and baby's breath trembled in her hands, shaking so violently that a few petals detached and drifted to the marble floor. It felt like time had fractured. Just seconds ago, the organ music had swelled. Just seconds ago, she had been walking toward him, her heart hammering with a mixture of nerves and overwhelming love. She had felt beautiful. The dress, a custom mermaid silhouette she had spent 3 paychecks on, felt like armor. Now, it felt like a prison. A ripple of gasps went through the congregation. Elena's mother, sitting in the front row, stood up, her hand flying to her mouth. Mark's groomsmen were looking at their shoes, shifting uncomfortably, but Mark did not look uncomfortable. He looked triumphant. He looked like a man who had finally decided to take out the trash. "Mark," Elena whispered, her voice cracking. "Please. Not here. Let's just go back to the vestry." "Why?" Mark laughed, a sharp, cruel sound that grated against her ears. "So you can cry and manipulate me in private?" "No. I want everyone to see why I ca not do this. I ca not tie myself to someone who has no self-control. It's embarrassing, Elena. Walking down the street with you is embarrassing." The choice hung before her, sharp and jagged like broken glass. She could run. The heavy oak doors were 100 feet behind her. She could turn around, gather the heavy skirts of her gown, and sprint, or waddle, as Mark would probably say, out of the church and into the parking lot. She could vanish. She could let him have the final word and disappear into a life of shame. Or she could stay. She could try to salvage a shred of dignity. She could speak up. "I love you," she said, the words tasting like ash. "Mark, we've been together for 4 years. You said appearance did not matter." "You said," "I lied," Mark interrupted, his voice booming. "I thought if I pushed you, you'd change. But you did not. And honestly, I look at you in that dress, trying to look elegant, and I just feel disgusted." The word hung in the air. Disgusted. Elena felt the heat rise up her neck, a burning crimson tide of humiliation. She looked at the priest, who was staring at his Bible as if hoping to disappear into the text. She looked at her bridesmaids. Her best friend Sarah was crying, but she was not moving. No one was moving. They were all paralyzed by the sheer audacity of the cruelty. "You have a choice, Elena," Mark sneered, stepping closer, looming over her. "You can walk out of here and go work on yourself, maybe try again in a few years when you reach a size that does not make me want to vomit. Or you can stand here and beg. But the wedding is off. The party is off. And judging by the way that seam is straining on your hip, you should probably get a refund on the dress before you rip it." He pointed the microphone at her, waiting for her answer, treating her heartbreak like a game show. The silence stretched, thin and agonizing. Elena opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The air in the church had turned into syrup, thick and unbreathable. She wanted to scream at him, to slap him, to tell him that she was worth more than a number on a scale. But the insidious voice in the back of her head, the voice Mark had been nurturing for years, whispered, "He's right. Look at you. You ruined everything." Elena did not run. She did not fight. She simply collapsed inward. The energy required to hold her head up vanished. Her shoulders slumped. The grand cathedral, which she had personally decorated with thousands of dollars worth of lilies and hydrangeas, money from her own savings, began to spin. Mark, sensing his total victory, did not stop. He seemed to feed off her silence. It's not just the weight, is it? He turned to the crowd, engaging them as if he were giving a keynote speech. It's the laziness. It's the lack of discipline. I am a rising executive. I need a partner who reflects my ambition. Elena is comfortable. She's stagnant. From the corner of her eye, Elena saw the movement. It started with one person in the third row, then spread like a contagion. People were pulling out their phones. The little black rectangles were raised, camera lenses fixed on her face. They were recording. She was going to be viral. The fat bride dumped at the altar. A meme. A cautionary tale for TikTok. Do not cry, she told herself. Do not give him the satisfaction of tears. But her body betrayed her. A hot tear tracked through her professional makeup, stinging her cheek. Then another. Oh, look, Mark mocked, feigning sympathy. Here come the waterworks. Typical. You act like the victim, Elena, but you did this to yourself. You ate the cake. You skipped the gym. You chose to be this. Elena looked down at her hands. She had manicured them yesterday, a soft pearl pink. She remembered looking at the engagement ring, thinking how heavy it felt. Mark had insisted on picking it out. It was small, delicate. To make your fingers look less chubby, he had said, laughing it off as a joke. Why had not she seen it then? Why had not she seen that he hated her? I'm sorry, she whispered, the microphone picking up the sound because Mark was holding it cruelly close to her face. Sorry does not fix the fact that I wasted 4 years, Mark snapped. Now, get out of my sight. Go. He made a shooing motion with his hand, like dismissing a stray dog. Elena took a step back. Her heel caught on the hem of her gown. She stumbled, arms flailing, and landed hard on her knees. The impact sent a jolt of pain up her legs, but the sound of the dress tearing was louder. A sharp ryip echoed through the silent church. Laughter. It was not everyone. It was just a few people, Mark's frat brothers in the second row, a cousin who never liked her. But the sound shattered what little was left of her soul. She was on her knees at the altar, her dress torn, her mascara running, while the men she loved stood above her, looking down with a mixture of pity and revulsion. She was the architect of her own humiliation. She was a professional wedding planner. She made dreams come true for other people. She was known for her precision, her taste, her ability to handle any crisis. But she could not handle this. She was just the fat girl who thought she deserved a prince. Pathetic, Mark muttered, finally lowering the microphone, though his voice still carried. Someone help her up and get her out of here before she breaks the floor tiles. Elena closed her eyes, wishing the marble beneath her would open up and swallow her whole. She waited for her mother to rush forward, for Sarah to scream, for someone to save her. But the shock was too heavy. The room was frozen in a tableau of cruelty. She prepared herself to stand up, to begin the longest walk of her life back down the aisle, past the phones, past the judging eyes. She braced herself for a life where this moment would replay in her head every single night. I am nothing, she thought. He is right. I am absolutely nothing. Then, the sound of the heavy church doors slamming open broke the spell. It was not a normal opening, it was a violent, percussive boom that shook the dust from the rafters. The atmosphere in the church shifted instantly. The air pressure seemed to drop, the temperature plummeting 10 degrees in a second. The murmurs and the snickering cut off as if a physical blade had severed the sound. Elena, still on her knees, turned her head toward the entrance. Silhouetted against the bright afternoon light of the open doors stood a figure. He was tall, broad-shouldered, immovable. Behind him, 3 other men fanned out, moving with the synchronized lethality of soldiers or predators. They wore black suits that cost more than Mark's annual salary. They did not look like wedding guests. They looked like an execution squad. The men in the center stepped into the nave. As the light adjusted, Elena recognized him, and her breath caught in her throat. Viktor Volkov. He had been a client 3 months ago. She had organized a corporate gala for his logistics company. She remembered him as terrifyingly polite, a man of few words who paid in cash and whose eyes, cold, steel gray, seemed to see through every polite fiction she offered. She knew the rumors. Everyone in Chicago knew the rumors about the Volkov family. They did not just move logistics, they moved everything. They owned the shadows of the city. Victor walked down the center aisle. His gait was unhurried, smooth, predatory. He did not look at the guests. He did not look at the phones still recording. His eyes were locked on the altar. "Who the hell are you?" Mark demanded, his voice regaining some of its bluster, though it wavered slightly. "This is a private event. Get out." Victor did not answer. He kept walking. The sound of his dress shoes clicking on the marble was a rhythmic countdown. Click. 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 As he passed the pews, guests instinctively shrank back. The aura of violence radiating from him was palpable. He reached the front, stepping over the rose petals Elena had dropped. He stopped 3 feet from where Elena knelt. He did not look at Mark. He looked down at her. For a moment, Elena thought she saw something flicker in those cold gray eyes, something hot and furious, but it was gone instantly. He extended a hand. It was large, scarred across the knuckles, steady as a rock. "Stand up, Elena," Victor said. His voice was not loud, but it possessed a gravity that made disobeying physically impossible. Trembling, she placed her hand in his. He gripped her fingers firmly, pulling her to her feet with an effortless strength that made her feel light as a feather. He did not let go. He pulled her slightly behind him, placing his body between her and Mark. "Excuse me," Mark shouted, stepping forward, his face red. "You see, not just walk in here and grab my fiancée. Who do you think you are?" Victor finally turned his attention to the groom. He looked Mark up and down, his expression one of mild boredom, like a man observing a stain on his shoe. "Fiancée?" Victor asked. "I heard you just fire her." "Quite publicly." "That's between us," Mark spat. "Security? Where is the security?" "Your security is sleeping in the parking lot," Victor said calmly. "And the doors are locked. No one leaves until we conclude our business." "Business?" Mark laughed nervously. "I do not know you." "But you know my money," Victor said. Mark's face went pale. The red flush drained away instantly, leaving him looking like gray putty. I do not know what you're talking about." Victor reached into his jacket. The movement was slow, deliberate. "You owe $150,000 to the Northside Sportsbook. You owe another $80,000 to the loan sharks in Cicero. And you owe $200,000 to my organization." Gasps erupted from the pews again, louder this time. Elena stared at Mark's back. "Gambling?" Mark, who yelled at her for buying Starbucks because they needed to save for a house. "You lying?" Mark shrieked, his voice cracking into a high pitch. "You took out the loans against her credit," Victor continued, his voice like a judge reading a death sentence. "You maxed out her cards. You emptied her savings account this morning. You planned to humiliate her, leave her at the altar, and skip town with the cash you stole from her accounts, using the wedding cancellation as a distraction." Elena felt the world tilt. He stole everything. It was not just her heart. It was her life. Her savings. Her credit. "Prove it." Mark screamed, looking around wildly for an exit. "I do not need to prove anything to a cockroach," Victor said. "Get out." Mark lunged, trying to regain control, raising the hand that held the heavy microphone as if to strike. In a blur of motion too fast to track, Victor moved. He caught Mark's wrist, twisting it until the bone snapped with a sickening crunch. Mark screamed, dropping the mic. It hit the floor with a deafening thud. But the silence that followed was even heavier. Because as Mark fell to his knees, clutching his broken wrist, Victor did not stop. He reached behind his back and drew a weapon. A matte black pistol. He did not wave it around. He did not threaten the crowd. He simply pointed the barrel directly at the center of Mark's forehead. "Too fat for the white dress?" Victor asked softly, repeating Mark's earlier insult. Mark stared up at the gun, his eyes crossed in terror. He stopped screaming. He stopped breathing. "Please," Mark whined, tears streaming down his face now, snot bubbling at his nose. Please, do not kill me. I'll pay. I'll pay you back. You have nothing, Victor said. You are nothing. You tried to sell this woman's dignity to cover your own incompetence. Mark looked past Victor, locking eyes with Elena. Elena. Tell him. Tell him to stop. I love you. Baby, I did not mean it. It was just the stress. Elena looked at the men on his knees. The men who had called her disgusting. The men who had stolen her money. The man who was now begging for his life, using her as a shield. She is not your baby, Victor said, cocking the hammer of the gun. The click echoed like a gunshot in the silent church. She is the debt payment. Mark blinked. What? You owe me money you cannot pay, Victor said. So, I am collecting the collateral. You did not want her. Fine. I take her. The debt is cleared. Take her. Mark stammered, hope flaring in his terrified eyes. Yes. Yes, take her. She's yours. Just do not shoot me. She's worth the debt. Take her and go. Elena felt a coldness settle in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. It was clarity. Absolute, crystalline clarity. Mark had just traded her life for his. He had not just insulted her body, he had just sold her soul to a man with a gun to save his own skin. Elena looked at Mark, sniveling on the floor, and felt the invisible chains snap. For years, she had made herself smaller to fit into his world. She had starved herself, apologized for taking up space, thanked him for loving someone like her. She had thought he was the prize. Now, seeing him trade her like cattle, she realized he was not a prize. He was a parasite. She stepped out from behind Victor. Elena, stay back, Victor warned, his eyes never leaving Mark. No, Elena said. Her voice was steady. Strong. It surprised even her. She walked up to Mark. He looked up at her, relief washing over his face. Elena, thank God. You tell him. You go with him, and it's all fine, right? Elena looked down at him. She did not feel love. She did not feel hate. She felt nothing but revulsion. You are pathetic, she said. It was not a scream. It was a fact. And you wrong. What? Mark asked. I'm not worth your debt, she said. I'm priceless. And you could not afford me if you had $1 billion. She turned to Victor. The gun was still raised, but Victor was looking at her now. The intensity in his gaze made her knees weak in a completely different way. He was not looking at her like she was a piece of property he had just acquired. He was looking at her like she was the only living thing in the room. Victor, she said softly. Elena, he replied. Put the gun away. He's not worth the bullet. And he's certainly not worth ruining your suit for. Victor held her gaze for a long second. Then, slowly, the corner of his mouth twitched upward. A ghost of a smile. He decocked the weapon and slid it back into his holster. As you wish, he said. He looked back down at Mark. The lady has spared you. But if I ever see you in Chicago again, if I ever hear you speak her name, I will not be so gracious. Run. Mark scrambled to his feet, cradling his broken wrist. He looked at the crowd, then at the exit. He did not look back at Elena. He ran. He sprinted down the aisle, slipping once, scrambling up, and bursting through the doors, disappearing into the parking lot. The silence returned. Elena stood at the altar, the torn dress hanging around her. She felt the eyes of 300 people on her. The shame tried to creep back in. She was still the bride left at the altar. She was still the woman in the ruined dress. Victor moved closer. He reached out and gently took her chin in his hand, tilting her face up to his. You should know, he said, his voice low and rough, meant only for her. I have been watching you plan events for a year. I have seen you command rooms. I have seen you solve disasters with a smile. I have wanted to approach you 1,000 times, but I saw the ring on your finger and I respected it. He brushed a thumb across her cheek, wiping away a smear of mascara. But when I heard what he was planning, I could not stay away. You bought my debt? Elena asked, her voice trembling. I did not buy you, Elena, Victor said fiercely. I freed you. You are not a transaction. He stepped back and offered her his arm. Now. This place smells of cowardice and cheap cologne. Shall we leave? Elena looked at his arm. Then she looked down at herself. Victor, look at me. The dress is ripped. Everyone is staring. Victor turned to the congregation. His cold gaze swept over the guests, the family members, the friends holding phones. Let them stare, Victor announced, his voice carrying to the back of the room. Let them see what a queen looks like. He turned back to her, his eyes softening. You are breathtaking, Elena. In this dress, out of this dress, at any size. You take up space. Good. You deserve to take up space. You deserve to own the room. The tears came back, but they were not hot and stinging this time. They were releasing. For the first time in her life, a man was looking at her and not asking her to be less. He was asking her to be exactly who she was. Elena reached out and took his arm. She gripped the expensive fabric of his suit. She lifted her chin. She kicked the torn fabric of her hem aside. Let us go, she said. As they walked down the aisle together, the cameras were still flashing. The whispers were starting. But Elena did not hear them. She only felt the solid, dangerous warmth of the man beside her. She felt the heavy rhythm of his stride matching hers. They reached the doors. The sunlight outside was blinding, washing out the darkness of the church. Where are we going? She asked as they stepped onto the stone steps. Victor opened the door of a waiting black limousine. He looked at her, and this time, the smile reached his eyes. Wherever you want, Elena. The world is finally yours. She slid into the car, leaving the church, the groom, and the girl she used to be behind her in the dust. She was not the fat bride anymore. She was the woman who had walked through fire and found a dragon waiting to fly her home.